All right. Welcome everybody to our first presentation of the new year. I am so thrilled to introduce one of my oldest friends and incredible concert pianist, Tian Tian. Tian is on the faculty of Oakland University as Associate Professor of Piano and Area Coordinator. And she began her piano training at the age of 4 in her native China. And upon moving to the US, she studied with Logan Skelton, my teacher, and quickly began amassing top prizes at international and national competitions. Sorry about my dog. She continued her training at the Juilliard School, where she received a bachelor and master's in music degrees under the tutelage of Robert McDonald. And then she completed a DMA in piano performance and literature with a minor in chamber music and accompanying at the Eastman School of Music, where she studied and served as teaching assistant to Nalita True, my other teacher. She has great taste in teachers. Since 2008, Tian has returned to China annually to present concerts, lectures, and master classes, which have earned her the title of honorary professor at 10 universities in China. On a personal note, Tian is a lovely human being and fierce concert pianist. I can't think of someone better to talk to us about piano technique today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Julia, for the invitation. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. It's a pleasure and honor to present for CAMTA. So I want to just talk a little bit about technique in general. It is truly one of my most passionate topics of all times, and most of my teaching and performance is based on physical movement and technical training. I do believe that once we understand the interaction that we should have with the instrument, it will help us get through all the challenging passages and also create the colors we want in a very natural and comfortable manner. So a little bit about my own background. I did, as Julia said, most of my early training from the ages of 4 to 10 in China. My teacher of the time thought that our technique has to be way above the challenge that our repertoire presents. So I did about 3.5 hours of practice every day. And so the first hour is always technical training. So it's all like hand or exercise like that. Second hour is scales and arpeggios. Third hour is etude. And then if we have half an hour or an hour after that, we do repertoire. So in today's world, there's no way we can get our kids to practice 3.5 hours every day, let alone 3 hours of technique. So what I have found as a way for us to compensate is to always include scales and arpeggios. Most conveniently, the keys that their repertoire is in, so that way they can understand and how to build their technique while understanding all the passages that may be built upon the same patterns. But they will still ask you, why do I have to play scales and arpeggios? So hopefully throughout this hour, we can talk about exactly what we want to accomplish through scales and arpeggios and how they relate to repertoire from period to period. So I would like to share with you my slide. Okay. Can you see everything? Oh my gosh. All right. Sorry, I'm still trying to maneuver. Where's my screen? All right. Slideshow. Okay. So here's the big question: why do I need to practice scales and arpeggios? So what scales develop for us is really finger independence, strength, speed, agility, and overall technique. Because any kind of scale would qualify. So for example, you might have a 3-note scale, you might have a 4-note scale. Okay, and so that's basically half of what your technical passages would really encompass. And then you'll have arpeggios. So arpeggios are going to focus on finger dexterity and muscle extension, okay, for chord playing, and then your palm posture and also strength and overall posture and position. So the most convincing way of explaining to them is all of your repertoire are basically based on scales or arpeggios, which is adjacent, okay, or neighbor note stepwise motion, or skips. Okay, so you can always break it down and qualify or categorize them as either scales or arpeggios. So where do we begin with this training? When we look at all this, okay, so we can see this alignment, okay, from the body, okay, go through the shoulders, forearm, and then go into the fingers. So at all points, when we ever, even if we make just one drop, okay, all these different parts have to come together in order for us, again, to feel relaxed and comfortable at all times. So what we're looking at, okay, is how do we actually position our hand form here? Okay, where should we sit our wrist? What does the forearm and elbow do? Okay, and then again, where are we going to generate all these motion from? A lot of times kids think it's the shoulder, but it really should come from the back. Okay, so let's begin with our hand posture. 99%, I think, of technical difficulty is because of our thumb. Okay, just the way it is. I mean, if we take a look at our fingers, they're all different lengths. So if we want evenness, it's just like running on legs that one is shorter than the other. But not only we have 2, now we have 4 and 5, right? With the pinky, with the thumb. So when we take a look at a lot of our strength, right? 2, 3, 4 is a little weak, but if we didn't have to worry about 5 and all we did was 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, we can manage with 4. Okay, and so if we think back to the versionalists and we look through their repertoire, there is no 1 or 5. They just use 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 all the time. Okay, so we have to devote a lot of extra attention to our thumb and our pinky. But again, pinky is just a matter of strength and being able to stand up. A lot of times kids will play like this, so we have to train them how to stay up just like your 2, 3, and 4. The thumb, it cannot stay up. So what we're looking for, okay, first of all, this picture is showing when you curve it in and you try to run, okay, that already creates tension on its own. Even without playing, if you feel that you open up your thumb and you curve it, you can feel all kinds of tension with this muscle group. So the best way that we want our thumb to set is really a little bit more vertical, okay, and straighter thumb. The other thing is about, just keep in mind, we're not saying that this is the default position of where your thumb needs to be. But if you're going to use it in combination with your 2, 3, and 4, and then you have to cross either over it or go under, you'll have to think about how high my thumb is going to be. It's not always going to be straight. So right here, like that. Sometimes it will have to go higher, so it makes itself a little bit longer and higher and almost equal to your 2, 3, and 4. That way, when they have to shift, it's much more smooth. Okay, so I just want to prep us with this a little bit. And then as I was preparing for this presentation, I looked up online to see what other pedagogues have to say or other ideas they may offer. And I came across this really, really nice video by Katie Boyd. I'm sorry, once I hit this click, we might have to listen through a couple ads. So she talks a little bit about what I'm saying, and she summarizes all the challenges and presents a couple ways to solve it. So I want to share it with you today. So opening your hand by talking about how twisting is a big issue.
Hand. Opening your hand looks like this. The thumb and the 5th finger are spread apart, and closing your hand. When piano students first learn how to play scales, they're often taught to tuck the thumb under and pivot over the 3rd finger. The problem with playing scales like that is it results in a twisting motion. You'll notice when I do that, I'm twisting, and then my elbow comes out a little bit this way, and then my finger comes out at an angle to the key, and then my thumb gets put into place, and then I come around this way.
Okay, so what she's talking about is very, very, very common, and oftentimes we will have kids come in, and as they turn, right, it's just like what she said. For them to change from one position to the other, what they do is they will turn their fourth finger, and then as a sort of result of that, their elbow also goes out. So then what we're seeing.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
We can't see you.
Oh, because I'm sharing the screen, right?
Yes, and I don't know about that video. I don't know if anybody else could see it. I couldn't see it.
You couldn't see the video either?
No, we could not see the video.
Oh, how do I share that then?
So maybe whenever you demonstrate something on the piano, you could go out of the share screen and then you could come back. And when you share the video, I think there is at the beginning when you share screen, you have to click on two boxes. Maybe that didn't happen. We heard the sound, but we didn't see the picture.
I see. It's because I just went from my PowerPoint, so that the box didn't show up.
So yeah, and then if you do side by side with speaker, then you can see her and the screen that she's showing. So
okay, I'll keep that in
go to
mind.
the top right of your computer and to view, and then if you do side by side with speaker, then she can share her screen and we can see her at the same time.
I don't see it, but that's all right. I'll just recap what she was talking about. So the twisting is because once they want to turn, what they do is they will actually turn the current finger they're on, and then as a result of that, their elbow will go out. And that's why you get a lot of unevenness. Okay, and then the other thing she says after that is that to get away from that, oftentimes what people will say is let's break it. So it's a position change. So what we will do is we will go back to one position, and then what we will do is lift our finger up and then do the next position. Okay, so either way is very ideal, especially for scales, because it will present unevenness. Right? So this is understandable. Even if you do quickly, sometimes with scales, if they focus a lot on that bounce, then there is still going to be an up, down, up, down, up, down sort of sound. So what Katie says in her video is that she feels that the best way to do this oftentimes is to have the pinky pull inside. And then it helps to stabilize your hand like that. Okay, so you can try it. I found that was a little hard to grasp, and especially if we're turning on a black key, that's really hard to stabilize because this is so thin. Okay, so oftentimes what do I talk about are two things. So it's different if we want to have the thumb go under versus if we're crossing over it. Crossing over oftentimes is even a little bit easier than going under. So what you want to do is you're going to position your hand, okay, instead of being flat like this, slightly higher. So we angle it, in other words, your palm is a little bit higher instead of landing here. That helps for us when we want to go over it to naturally turn and rotate. Okay, in some way you can also think about maybe it's your thumb rolling. So we starting from this part of your thumb, and you kind of roll towards the nail of it. So that helps with the rotation. I'm gonna do it from my left hand so you can see clearer. So we start like this, and it rolls over. Okay, so what she's talking about is probably then what we want is to have the pinky come closer to the thumb. I think the result is the same. It's a different way of explaining it. So that will help with the crossing over. If we have to go under it, what we want to teach them is to have the thumb, okay, follow the other finger. So it will be right a little bit under the 2, a little bit behind the 3. So now, instead of me trying to go from and cross a fourth, all I have to do is move towards the C. Just a stepwise motion versus a fourth jump. So that's going to avoid the sudden turns and twistings. Okay, so these are the basic concepts of how do we get from one position to the next. So let's go back to the screen. So now, how should we relate all of this to speed? Okay, and how about the number of octaves? This is how I ask my students to practice. So at different age groups, I give them a different metronome marking. This is just an arbitrary mark. Okay, so if we say at 120 is your goal, okay, this employs a little bit the idea of like magic tempo, 6 magic tempo, where your first one is half of the speed and then you increase it periodically. So when you're looking at this, the first speed, okay, you can only do 1 octave because this is so slow and it takes so long to get through. Okay, so what we're looking for is each note is 2 clicks. So if we're counting just 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, and you will just do 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's very, very slow. The second speed is you do 1 note per click. So they're match. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. At that point, you can go 2 octaves. Okay, and then you will increase it and you can go 2 notes per click. So you'll go 1 and 2. Right, so you're playing 8th notes in other words. So if you can think about it as half note, quarter, eighths. Okay, and then we're going to go into 16th notes. So the speed is always increasing and increasing and increasing. That's very general and I'm sure a very common practice. So what we're looking for now is what they should be aware of, the mechanics, right? So thinking back to finger, palm, wrist, right, forearm, and then also body, is that balance is going to keep changing as we speed up. Okay, so when we're doing the 1 octave, so I'm going to log out of my screen later after we go through this chart so I can show it to all of you. All we're looking for is high finger. That's like weightlifting when you go into your exercise room, because we're looking for strength. We're not looking for fast, okay, motions. We're just looking for, can you do that and stabilize your body? So that needs fast attack because you have the time to lift, prepare, and to strike. That's why it is so slow. Okay, then when we go to the second speed, you only have half of that tempo now, so you don't have the time to do that and still keep all of this flat. So we're gonna eliminate the fast attack. It's all going to just be high finger because that's all the time you have. But we're still looking to develop the stretching, and then it's like always trying to do splits, right? So you lift as high as you can. Ballet dancers, they always begin by at the bar, like kicking their legs up. That's basically what we're trying to do. And then what we need to do as we get faster, we lift less and less and less and less until we're pretty much right above the key. Okay, so that's going to take the least amount of time for us to make contact with the key, so then that way we can at the finger level get faster. Then what do we do as we want to go from 120 to 132 to 144, 152, all these to meet all these tempo markings? We have to start using our arm to thread everything together, so everything sounds like it's one large sweep instead of just notes moving. Okay, so this video, I can send you all the links later. I found a video on YouTube for Long Long, where he goes through, there's a 101, like how Long Long teaches scales. And so I thought it wrapped it up really, really well. But just for time's sake, this is what we can go through. So what he's saying is exactly what we're talking about right now, okay? So this is what it means to do the high finger. You cannot wait here. That's not fast attack. That's just high finger. So what you need to do, stay on the key. Okay, and then right before you play, you lift. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. So you see, there's no involvement. This is all passive. Okay, everything is coming from just the fingers. That's gonna help me to get all kinds of strength and independence. So we do this as high as you can. Keep them stable. Okay, after you're done, you do that twice, and then you move to 2 octaves. So you can tell the sound is a lot more smooth than what we did before because we lost this type of attack. Okay, how about when we go much higher? So then we start to be really close to the keys. That's what's going to help you to double your speed. Okay, and then if you have larger, what you need to do is think about, you want a swing to happen, so you can't keep your wrist at the same level all the time. We want to swing down in the middle, which is the second octave. So then there's a little bit of shaping and swing effect. Okay, so for my students, this is what we do. We have a set of keys each week. Now we're doing our Michigan standard tests coming up in February and March. So we relate it to the technique, whatever level they're doing, those are the keys. And then we go through the routine. So they do the slow practice to really open up their palms, and then do the strengthening, and then they'll go through into however many octaves they have to do. So this is much more doable than if we keep assigning etudes, because it takes up time. Okay, this is then everybody should have 5 to 10 minutes every day to go through their scales. So once we explain all the scales and arpeggio, all the scales and what we're supposed to establish. Okay, let's take a look at repertoire. So I really like Czerny's Opus 849. I feel that at this point, compared to 599, these are actual pieces, and they combine a lot of different techniques alongside scales, arpeggios, repeated notes, and these general patterns. So as we're taking a look at this one in particular, in the beginning, what we can see, okay, is each individual scale is just one octave scale. So what we would do is we take each one of these and we repeat them. So you'll go until they understand. Huh? You can't hear me? Okay, yeah. So then, but what's new here, okay, in addition to just general scale, is actually a rotation. Okay, so if you see this coming from this, right, because you're supposed to play the scale, come back to the E. Okay, so after we take apart all the octave scales and have them repeat, okay, what we do is we ask them to only play 1-5, 1-5, 1-5, so they can understand the big pattern. How do I get from one scale to the next? So they'll end up doing this. Okay, and then what we have to address at this point is what we were talking about. How high is your thumb going to be? Okay, if we're very, very low with this, we almost feel like we're a little bit stuck, because they're going to end up digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the keys. Okay. Second reason why we want a little bit higher thumb is actually their hands are probably not as big when they get to here. We're looking for 9-10-year-olds who's played 3-4 years. So this will help them to move from one to the other rather than staying low. Okay, just think, if I'm doing a 12th, this is easier for me than this, because that's much further. Okay, the arch is going to help them, okay, to come back. So that's the added element with this etude. Okay, as we look down here, okay, this changes from one octave scales combined with rotation to 5-note pattern. Okay, and then we go up and down. Now, have we thought about when composers, right, who actually play the piano, they indicate these markings for us? Oftentimes we look at that and we go, okay, he wants us to put an accent. But there are also technical guides, okay? If we're looking at this 8 notes and we stay flat, what we're feeling as we continue to repeat that is tension building up between 3-4-5, 3-4-5. Okay, we also lose a little bit of speed as we come back, because it's many, many notes without kind of an adrenaline push or energy boost. Okay, so when he's saying, I want an accent there, he's telling you, you got to push off of that note so it bounces you back and you boost yourself so you can retain your speed. So instead of thinking about the accent as in down, up, like that kind of strike. What we actually should do is roll into it. That is like when we're running and when we're trying to push off the wall and then bounce us back. That's the motion we want. Or if you're swimming and you're making a turn, right? You do your laps front and back. You get to the board. What are you supposed to do? You make your turn. You kick off of that board so it gets you a little bit of distance without having to do all these arm motions. Okay, so I want you to just try thinking about those accents more like a pushing off and adding the rotation. So that's a continuation of rotation. As we look at here, that's the other direction. So now we're rotating from the 5, okay, instead of the thumb. All right, and then an addition thing is here. Okay, so now we go up and down. That is an extension or expansion of the 5-finger scale, however you want to look at it, okay? So again, we're looking at this. Okay, so we don't want to think about that. You're already tight, okay? So you have to use the end of the scale. Okay, so and feel that energy that's going to help you to push back. So in that aspect, our strong beat should be on the 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 instead of 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Even when we count like that, you can already feel that when we feel the 2, okay, as your strong beat, you'll have much more momentum than always establishing the 1, 1, 1. Okay, so this is when the musical aspect is going to come in and actually help you to get through technique. Okay, so if we look at number 9, they're always in groups, okay, in these. So they'll try it in the right hand and then they'll do one in the left hand. And these two will really complement each other really, really well. So with the left hand, that's exactly what he's trying to explore. You want to lean and you'll want to use your body to also feel that swing. And come back instead of staying flat and centered. Do you hear how that second one sounds slower than the first one? Okay, it's just because I have that body momentum to help me, and then now I'm hearing it in large quarter note pulses instead of a whole bunch of 16th notes. Okay, so the highlight here is when we get this bunch right here. Okay, so this is, we look at contour a lot of times of notes. Okay, so if we're looking at this right here, it would be a little hill. Come back down, then he climbs back up again. So what we need to do is really explore exactly how long is each one of these. Okay, so in order for me to get to here, there are 2 thumbs. So I have to understand very, very, very clearly where do I position my thumb. If this note, for example, 3 thumbs. So these 2 are passing by. They're passing by. You need them a little bit higher. Because this is much easier for me to turn over than if I go like this. That takes a lot more work. Okay, so if I'm a little higher, that's easier to go by. Okay, but it's not stabilizing. It's not a stabilizing fingering because when I'm like this, what do I want to do naturally? I want to fall. So I need to...
We can't see you.
There should be a window. There's no window of me? Okay.
I can.
Okay.
I can.
So I'll just do it big. So when we do it like this, okay? Because these 2 are passing by, so we don't want our fingers to be so low because that's going to slow you down. Okay? If we go a little higher, it's easier for our hand to turn. Okay? But as a result, it doesn't stabilize because you can't stay like this for very long. So that's why, okay? But if you understand that's the whole point, that's fine because that you really want that natural fall of gravity so it can help you to shift. However, this is the first peak or step I'm going to get. So that one, you want a lower thumb. Because you want to establish now your stability. Because you can't keep running like that. And then it's going to trip the back turn. Okay, so roll, roll, stabilize. and then you start over your roll now. Okay, so what you want to do is to help your students to pick out, if I'm really good and I really understand this back and forth scale, when I get to a new etude, what's the additional challenge now? All right, and so if you sequence it throughout 849, if you want to just focus on scales, you'll be able to see that each one of them gets a little bit harder. So we're going to quickly go through those and then move on to repertoire and how scales relate to repertoire. So that's 8 and 9. If we go forward, the next time we get a scale is in A major. Okay, so now you can see instead of just doing scales and arpeggios, he's doing a 4-note group. Okay, a little turn, and then an octave. So the length of your scale is varying. And again, this comes, you have to really know where the changes of directions are. And every time there is a change in direction, you have to address it. You can't just try to go through it smoothly because it's not a smooth line. Okay, and then you'll also see that there's a little bit of combination of broken chords. Okay, again, rotation and scale come hand in hand many times. Okay, and then because it is higher now, since we're in A major and we have 3 sharps, okay, your hand's position as a whole is going to be much higher than where we were, okay, with just either C major or even G major where there's only 1 sharp. Okay, and then once you go into B or anything like that, where you have more sharps or all those black keys than white keys, then your entire hand position will change. Okay, all right, so as we go on to the next time, okay, then this is E flat major, okay? What I want to highlight is right here. When the 2 hands, okay, are in parallel, I mean, they're exactly the same here, and then they start to depart, okay, from the second bar. Things like this. Ensemble is an issue. Okay, unevenness with scales is always an issue. Okay, usually we use dotted rhythm to practice to really highlight the differences and then they emphasize on each note changes and all that. But when you have 2 hands, it's very, very, very important that both of them will feel the accent together. Okay, oftentimes we think, oh, we have a leading hand and then the other one follows, but your timing is going to be slightly off if they're not completely synchronized. Okay, so synchronization here. All right, I'm going to zoom out of this so I can show you a little bit what I mean, okay? When you play that, what you need to do is when you have, they have to go up completely together at the same time and then down. Okay, and then you go. Okay, this cannot just be flat. And then use your right hand. Do you see how it sounds like one hand is clear, the other is not? It's because the other is not tracing the same up and down. Okay, and so even though they're completely matched in rhythm, they're not matched in sound. So you have to make sure you synchronize the overall motion so that they are following instead of just right. Okay, so if you hear that your students are a little bit uneven in that aspect, that motion might be something that you can check out. Okay, so after we do all this type of training, how does it actually relate to repertoire? Let's begin with Bach. So there are a couple examples I'm using for Bach. The first one is D minor invention. So with this one, I want to first of all talk about the Baroque articulation, the Baroque sound, okay? It's hard to explain in a way, but it's kind of easy at the same time, because what are we looking for? It's not exactly legato, it's not exactly staccato, it's somewhere in between. We call that detached sound, okay? But exactly how do we produce it? Okay, so these are built on scales, so I just want to show you this is how we're going to relate to it. Okay, so when we're taking something like that, okay, this will be a completely legato sound. there's a slight little overlap between notes. So we don't want that. Staccato, light staccato especially, starts from the key, bounces up. We obviously don't have time to do that because you're gonna get tension. It's so fast. Okay? Detached sounds in general start above the key and goes down into the key. So that's basically what we're looking for. Okay? There is no connection or overlapping between the note. You have to release before the next. There has to be no bounces coming from your arm. Okay, so we're staying right above the key. Now, if we go faster, we also need to make sure we're basically hovering over the keys. Okay, because of all the black keys we have to use, what we're doing are two things. One, we got to shift ourselves in so we're close to the black keys. We cannot play these here and then start shifting. That's gonna create a lot of unevenness. Even if you make it, it sounds like it's fluctuating a little bit, your sound. Second, because of the black keys, again, we have to be a little bit higher. We cannot be here. Then we're going up and down, okay? So we find ourselves, now the wrist here is matching with the top of your palm, and you're sort of hovering over the key. And then you release the fingertips. It should get you pretty much that right color that you want, okay? Somewhere in between a legato and a detached sound, okay? Then in the period, what we're expecting also, okay, is when we play pieces like the jig, okay, right here, okay, this is what we're looking at, okay? There's a big sequence here connected to another sequence right after. It's all built on scales, all right? So this is why your technical training, okay, the pure ability of playing scales accurately at the speed you need, cleanly, okay, cannot begin when your piece needs it. It needs to be done before we get to this passage. Okay, it's so funny. When I was, Uchida, years ago when I was a little, I watched, those video VHR like video cassettes where she did this a recording of all the WC etudes, and I revisited it last year, and then the journalist was asking her, what are you hoping to establish or learn through these etudes? And then she said, nobody's really trying to improve their technique through this. You have to have good technique in order to play it. Okay, so we're just trying to create colors. And he called them etudes not really because they are finger exercises, but because he has a certain sound in mind. And so when we're looking at this, okay, assuming our student got through all of this flawlessly, okay, we have to consider now the depth of key, the tension that you apply, okay, a change in that in order for us to bring out this terraced dynamic. Okay, so for instance, at the forte here, okay, is it okay if I get out of this score? Okay, so what you will hear, okay, a lot of times the sequences in Bach is hard for students because they try to do too much shaping within. So that's the first discussion you'll have to have. The first group just has to stay all out. Okay, that's when technique kicks in. You need to apply the same attack on every single note of that passage. Okay? That's your first set. You cannot start doing shaping because it'll make it really hard for the next set to sound like you've changed because you'll have too much fluctuation of dynamics within just one set. Okay, so at that set, we want to use full power to play. And you go all the way down into the keys. Okay, next one, you do half of what you just did, and you don't go all the way down, but maybe 3/4. Then you go right like around where your escapement is. Okay, so then you like link it together, and then That's how you do sequencing. Okay, and then again, scale passages, and you link it together. You have to really understand how much power or energy am I applying at my fingers, and that's what's going to help you to control your dynamic change. The next part, okay, you have, okay, again, just little turns like that, but it's an overall scale. So this is when we add a little bit of variation in terms of pulse. So you want 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay, instead of keeping it all at even. Even if you do your crescendo, it doesn't work because what we're trying to do is add direction. And then that will get you up. Okay, so these are two cases where after you can train and do all the technical side, okay, of scales and arpeggios, then add these elements so we can shape in the piece. Okay, let's talk about how that differs from Mozart. So before we talk about the piece itself, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the clock. This is what I use diligently in my teaching. The clock to me, okay, right where 9 and 3 is, that's where your keyboard is. Okay? Usually what we do, how do I go back? Okay. Usually what we do is we position our hand just like this, right on the key, okay? That's what we call just a pure landing, okay? And we read treatises and people will talk about where position goes. I usually think about the bottom of my forearm, okay, lining up with my fingertips. You will read a lot of times they talk about the top of the forearm and the palm, okay? I think that to me is a little bit too high. Okay, now 6 o'clock, that's where you're going to do your drop. That's when your weight completely goes, and you have to see that they're going below the key. That's how drops happen. Okay, and then you will oftentimes go around and go above the key. Okay, that's how technique is all about going in circles. Sound is about going in circles, but you have to understand how big your circles are. Does that make sense? Sometimes you'll have a big line, you're going to do a big dip like this. Sometimes it's very small. You're just going around here, so it's more like an oval than a circle. Why is that important in Mozart? So when you get this, the most famous Mozart sonata, right? You come in and you have all these scales. You take a look at that. Where is my circle? My circle is right here. The contour of the line even shows me that that's a circle, okay? Now, here's how you do your circle. If you're going from the lower note to the top note, that's the bottom half, okay? So counterclockwise, bottom half, 9 to 3, okay? When you go from G to C back, that's the top. You're at 3, you do above, okay? And you go back to 3. Does that make sense? I will show it to you. Okay, so this is what we were talking about. I'm landing. Okay, this is my 3 to 9. Okay, so if I go, I don't want to start my circle now. This is fine. I just want to do it here. I'm thinking 9 is here, and then I'm going down. 6, go back to 3. Okay, and then I'm coming back from G to C. I'm at 3, I go around it, 12, and then I'm back. There's my circle. Okay, so that's what Mozart sounds need. So if we're going through this and we go diligently, there's no sequence shaping. We're just trying to understand the swing. Okay, so if we do one position flat here, and then I'm going to do my swing. There's my collar, okay? I cannot have my wrist stay flat. That's a flat line. No matter how much we think about, oh, I want to do a crescendo, I want to do a decrescendo, you don't have the general gesture in. Then I can talk about how do I shape it, right? Sequence. So how do I shape that? Well, the louder I want to be, the bigger my swing is. And then my last one, I don't do one because I want a flat line. Okay? And that gives you the color that Mozart has, which is just swing everywhere. I feel like his sound is always sugar-coated. You never really arrive. Okay, and so who do we go to really to listen to Mozart? A lot of times we go to Uchida, and if you have a chance, I don't want to move around with the screen today, but if you take a look at her recording of the G major, so this one, okay, when she does, okay, she plays it like this. Okay, how should I do this? Let's do it the normal way, okay? Usually when we do a scale, we're heading towards the top note, so the highest note. Okay, it doesn't sound so bad, but it doesn't sound so Mozart because it's kind of pushed. So then what does she do? So I kept listening to it, and then I realized she pushes, but she doesn't really land. So she pulls back. She'll push here, and then she'll come back. I didn't do it, of course, as good as she does, but that's the idea. You give the momentum, and then you don't arrive. So, so you have all this shaping that's going up and down, very much like how they portrayed his laugh, I think, in Amadeus. He's always like, like all this. And you think about Queen of Night and how she does all her large thing. It's never just directly screaming at you. Okay, so it's avoiding that sort of big landing at the top. Now, that changes when you go to Beethoven. He wants arrivals. That's where he gets his strength and his rhythmic integrity. So if we go now to take a look at this, I had a different example before yesterday, and then I had a student that's playing the concerto, and that's all we talked about yesterday. So I thought, I want to just remind you a little bit of what we said with the tyranny, right? When there are changes of pattern, we need to make sure we acknowledge all of this. Doesn't this look a little bit like the tyranny? Okay, when we did this one. Okay, and obviously he studies with him, so he's going to see all this, right? Etudes are always supposed to prepare you for the technical passages of the period, right? So that's probably why you see a lot of similarities in the classical period and what Czerny wrote. Okay, and I think Chopin's etudes are to support his larger works, and Debussy's etudes are to support his larger works, and that's pretty much the mindset. Okay, so same passage, right? Okay, will we go? Okay, Beethoven wants that arrival. He's not gonna look for. That's not Beethoven, okay? You're like way off the mark if that's what happens, okay? So that's the clear distinction between scales you will see in Mozart and scales you will see in Beethoven. Now, when you go to here, right, this is an added element, so that's the same pattern, okay? But you're not going to do the same attack. Why? Because he adds this here. That means he wants beats 3 and 4, okay, to be stronger. So you're not going to do that anymore. You're going to stay flat. And now push. Okay, that's completely different from the same pattern in the right hand without any left hand. Okay, so things like that, and then you have to continue and you add all this. So it's getting more and more and more and more complicated, which again goes back to what we said. You cannot start building technique when you first see it that just your ability to play scales, that's all done before we get to this piece. Otherwise, you'll have a really, really, really difficult time learning it. And that's why I now understand when my childhood teacher was talking about how the technique has to be way above the repertoire. Okay? All right. So now what happens when we go into Chopin? Okay, so at this point, right, you should be able to do the Mozart scale, you should be able to do the Beethoven scale, and you should be able to go back and forth between how much tension do I apply at my fingers, how much speed do I change. Now he wants to use his scales and arpeggios essentially to shape and do timing, right? Because that's what in the Romantic period trumps. So well, I shouldn't say trumps, but it's one of the top priorities is timing. Okay. Now, oftentimes in his nocturne, especially when he puts these cadenza-like sections, you will actually see staccatos on top of them. Okay. They're not really for you to do staccatos. It's just because staccatos take more time to play than legato. So they're more for timing. He makes it that you have to delay it if you actually follow his instructions, okay? So if we're gonna see it in some of his pieces, we're gonna say that that's a valid understanding. So if we look at this scale right here, da da dee da 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 dee da da da, right? You can actually begin by adding staccatos here. So it will be broken up, okay? I actually spent so much time practicing this scale today. So when you go, that's much better than trying to do a legato and taking time. Because that sounds too heavy. But if you actually break it, yeah. You do that for one octave, okay? And then do legato. And then you decay. And then this is softer. And then you add speed. So for every octave, you have an understanding of how you're controlling timing, okay? And how are you changing your articulation? And then are you going to add dynamics? That's how you shape the scale. So that's a newly added thing, I think, that we have to consider. Now, every period, every new period, or I don't know, later period we go across, we have to think with everything that we all already considered, okay, for the Baroque, the Classical, the Romantic, what is the new element I have to think about, okay? Now, the second thing I want to bring out is also this here, okay? This is voicing, okay? So even when we have his beginning of the ballade, okay, or Beethoven, there's a voicing change as we go from low to high. That helps to give a bigger sweep than if we just bring out one voice. Okay, so for example, okay, so if I go slowly, and then I only want to bring out my right hand, that's one sound. Then I can try it with just the left. Now, how about we try a combination? We bring out the left hand at the beginning, and then we slowly transfer it to the top. You hear the color change? Okay, so that's something you can explore, and we highly encourage it when we have large runs like that we always add voicing to be a part of the equation. So then there's a little bit of voice exchange, and then you don't have to actually put so much pressure on the leading hand, right? The left hand is in control, and when it feels like, oh, I'm about to lose my control, well, the right hand takes over. So you actually have a better chance of making through long scales or long arpeggios if you think about that. And it helps with the voicing. It also helps to expand the number of octaves you're going to hear, because you have the lowest and you have the highest instead of just one. It'll cut at least your length or your range by one octave. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, I know I'm running out of time, and these are all the examples I have for scales. With the next 5 minutes I have, I do want to just briefly mention, on top of all of this, what's the difference between scales and arpeggios? Well, this is the perfect kind of transition because this one has scales and a little bit of broken chord and definitely position changes. Okay, so what we talked about earlier with scales and position changes, creating hopping, I really do think that's the only thing that works most of the time for broken chords. Okay, so what we're looking for is when I practice that, we first block. Right? So what you're trying to do, okay, is when I have to play 3-note scale plus an like a leap, right, of a fourth, I want to make sure as I go down the arpeggios, okay, let's stop sharing. As I go down the registers, I'm not shifting. I want the same hand posture, same opening, okay? So then I don't have to get to a position and then adjust. So if I stay in this hand position, I'm always going to play A, G, F, C, A, G, F, C, A, G, F, C, A, G, F, C. So that's why you begin by blocking. Okay, in addition to, of course, you get to know your notes and all that stuff better. Okay, so that you start by blocking and you practice that multiple times, so you drill the hand position. Then you go across. You cannot do it like this. That doesn't help. Okay, what you want to do is quickly train your large muscles to know how much do I have to leap to go down and up by an octave. Okay, and then you split it. I'm not trying to do legato at all. If you can see, okay, the elbow is tucked in at all times. Okay, now an added thing that we have to talk about this. A lot of times kids play like this and they look great, and then they get to the center and then they start to go up with their shoulders, okay, because they feel cramped. Okay, so what you need to do is have them shift their body over, okay? That way, this feels right here the same as if they're sitting and they're playing this register, okay? So we shift, and as another supplemental thing is we lean back. So we're going here, okay? So right now, you can't really see, but my left butt is lifted. The left side, okay, because I want to now shift to the right because this is where I am and I want stability. I don't want to feel like I'm reaching. So I kick to the left, right. Okay, I go down, come to the center, go back. Then I go. Okay. That's what's going to thread together all your position changes, and you won't be able to really hear the lifting and the landing, because you'll have a much bigger gesture tying them together. Okay, if you just stay put and then you're hopping, then yeah, all you have is up and down, and that will create a lot of accents and breaks for you, and it won't sound pretty at all. Okay, and so again, if you can see, every problem that you have, every challenge that you have, you can find a physical way or movement to help to get through them, right? And so we have to really study the pattern first and understand exactly what does the pattern present, not what's hard for me, right? Because if you can solve the general issues, then you're halfway there. Right? And then you look for myself, maybe my fourth finger is weaker than most people. Okay, then you do 3-4, 3-4, 3-4 drill, 5-4, 5-4, 5-4 drill. But if you just dive in and go, oh, I can't play that, this is hard, you're not really focusing on the right things. Okay, so that's one thing. And then the second thing is, once again, you have to think about technique in 2 layers. There's a basic layer. That's so for my students, a lot of times I go, do you even know what you're supposed to do? What's the first step? And they're like, what do you mean, what's this first step? I said, do you even know what tempo you're supposed to get to? No. And I was like, well, you gotta listen to a recording, get a metronome marking. That's your first goal. Can you play from beginning to end at that tempo? And that you'll know, okay, what are the steps, right? for me, what do I need to do first? Then 2, 3, 4 for me to get through the passage so I can play without thinking about shaping, without thinking about anything else, just the notes accurately and comfortably. And then on top of that, we think, okay, what does my line need? What period am I in? We think about articulation, and it's an equation, right, that we have to get to the 50% mark first instead of always thinking I want to go to the 100, I want to go to the 100. Okay, but I love technique, and I can probably go on and on and on and on forever. But I hope that this encourages a lot of pianists to know there's always, technique is like doing cleaning. There's always a way to solve your issues. It's much easier and more direct than thinking, emotion, character. And a lot of times when kids are young, especially, before they can form their own feelings and their own way of communicating music, we try to help them create the sound first through musical movements. And then sometimes they hear it, and then now they start to feel it, and then they can add their own voice to it. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Tian. That was such an amazing amount of information that you gave us, and your technique is brilliant, even on a Zoom video. So
Thank you.
what do you say? Talking the talk. Do we have any questions for Tian?
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have my full view. I don't know if anyone's asked. How do I switch to that?
Oh,
I just had a little question. If they have really small hands,
yes.
how do you adjust that movement? Because they can't always reach. And
Exactly. So for little hands, the best, so what we talked about, remember, like the leaping over, that's gonna be very, very useful for them. Okay, so for example, I always show it to them. So an octave to them might be a 12, a 10th for me, right? So if I have to go, that's how I do it. I don't go, that kind of thing. And then the other thing is when they're trying to do chords, right? That becomes a new issue, even if they get over the hurdle of playing an octave, and then they start to add chords, and then the stretch between each finger is all different. So I did ask some of my students. I mean, you can't do anything with growth, that takes time. But what you can do is make them stretch out as much as they can with what they have. Okay, so we are all pianists, and even cellists, like they're the best examples, right? Their left hand is always bigger than their right hand because of all the stretching. And so what I have done is for SAT, like Michigan is so big about that. The first question of technique is always intervals. So I've asked them to take that and do stretching together. Okay, so what they will do is they'll take 2 fingers, for example, 2 and 3. So they'll start with a second, and then they just try to stretch out as much as they can, right? And then they keep extending. So that helps a little bit, and it gives a little bit more flexibility between the fingers. Okay, and then when they have to actually leap, okay, that whole idea of always thinking. So I've actually put a ball under my student's hand. Okay, so for example, even broken chords, like these. Okay, right hand's fine, and then they get to the left hand, right? And they're all stuck. And even adult students that I have, because this is a big stretch between B and F sharp, right? And so they can't get over it. So they try to turn and do all that thing. The best thing you can do, the only thing you can do, is really roll over it. Right, because if you try to do any other thing, it makes the distance even bigger than what it is. So we always want to remind them, no matter what you do, you still can't reach it. So what you need to do is think, what's the shortest distance? What's the minimum effort I can put in to get me there, right? And it's always just a straight line. So you just hop over it, and then you try to target. That's your best chance, okay, of trying to reach it. and then just keep telling them it'll just take time, you'll grow, you'll get bigger. But that's something that's really hard. So those are the two things I would probably do to just help and make it a little bit easier for them to get to where they need to be. Yeah.
And next month, Tina will tell us all to get narrow keyboards to help too.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and we had, I know you and I had this conversation, and then we talked about this at a festival with Kathy Leisinger, because they have those keyboards, and she was telling me about this girl, her hands were so small, and we asked her, well, what do you do? Because you can't bring a keyboard with you. And she said she practices on that just to understand how to move without like the daunting, because I think that's the first challenge is you look at that chord, your body tenses up because that passage is coming up and I can't reach it, I'm gonna mess up. So then you have a lower chance already of getting through that passage. So she says she wants to practice that without that kind of daunting idea, and then she understands how she's supposed to move. And then when she gets to a regular keyboard, she tries to move the same way. Again, you can't guarantee, even people who can reach it when it's a difficult passage, you can't guarantee you're going to get it all the time. Right, but all we're talking about is probability, and you build that ability to and the confidence to get it. And on that note, actually, they can, if they can't get a keyboard, they can just practice on the fallboard, right? And fallboard practice oftentimes helps a lot because they don't have to worry about playing the wrong note. There's no sound. And so that helps them to really focus on motion. And that actually also helps to focus on evenness, right? So if they're just on the fallboard, all they hear is da 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 da. So if they're playing a scale, that's even. If they're turning, and then it's all uneven. So I think all of that helps also with motion, with evenness, just a flat surface. Tabletops, they can even practice when they go on trips. I've actually asked them, a lot of them, to practice on their own body because then they can feel directly how each finger, the attack feels. And violinists do it all the time, right? They're practicing. And so all of that's gonna help. I met this Russian man when I was like very young, and he was telling us that in Russia, their exercise before the piano is like they stretch out their tissue here. So they would go every finger, and then what he can do, he was showing it to me, like they close completely. So when he does the second finger, like all of these knuckles they can touch each other. So he can basically do a split between every tissue, and we heard the horror stories, and like little kids, they get these cut so they can have longer fingers. I don't think it's really to that extent, but you can certainly make it much better to help with a little bit inside chord, that kind of reaching.
Well, thank you so much. I think we've probably gone way too over. Is it okay to have people email you if they have any
Yes,
more questions?
yes,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Then I'm going to type your Oakland email in the chat. So you guys, if you want to reach out to Tian, you can ask her anything else. Thank you so much. This has
Thank you.
been
Thank you
wonderful.
so much for having me. Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye. Okay, her let me turn that off.
Okay, perfect.